Hello, listeners. Have you ever studied English grammar for like 4 straight hours, aced every single multiple choice test, and understood absolutely everything you hear on your favorite shows? But the moment a native speaker turns to you and asks a simple question, your mind just goes completely blank.
Oh, I see it all the time. It's so common.
Right. I'm talking about that physical reaction. Your heart rate spikes, your palms get sweaty, and suddenly it feels like your brain has just wiped its entire hard drive. Well, what if it is believed by top language experts that the secret to real, effortless fluency requires absolutely no speaking partner at all?
Yeah, it's honestly one of the most frustrating paradoxes in language acquisition. I mean, I see it constantly in my work. We have millions of highly intelligent, dedicated learners pouring, unbelievable amounts of effort into the mechanics of the language.
Mhm.
They're memorizing vocabulary lists, they're studying complex conditional clauses, they're consuming hours of English media.
Doing all the right things, supposedly.
Exactly. Yet, when they are thrust into a real-world scenario, like a business meeting, a casual coffee shop interaction, or a phone call, they find themselves entirely frozen. They're trapped in the state of passive comprehension, completely unable to cross over into active production.
In the next 10 minutes, you will learn exactly why studying grammar and passive listening are actually holding your speaking skills back. And we will reveal the exact problem blocking your progress. Because, let's face it, we have all been there in some form or another.
Absolutely, everyone has.
You have the vocabulary locked away somewhere in your brain. You can read a complex financial article or a dense novel without reaching for a dictionary even once. But the bridge between understanding English and actually speaking English feels like this massive uncrossable canyon. And the traditional advice to fix this is always the same, right? Everyone just tells you to, go find a speaking partner.
Right, which completely ignores the reality of adult life. The core problem we're looking at today is a very specific type of bottleneck. Based on extensive research by cognitive linguists, the harsh reality is that studying grammar rules and just passively listening to English alone will never, on their own, trigger the neurological adaptations required for spontaneous speaking.
They just don't flip that switch in the brain.
No, they don't. You have to actively generate language. But then you hit that immediate, incredibly practical roadblock. What if you do not have a speaking partner?
Right. Finding someone to practice with consistently is a nightmare for most people. I mean, you have time zone differences. You have the financial cost of hiring a tutor.
It adds up so fast.
It really does. And even if you find a free language exchange partner, you have to deal with the awkwardness of correcting each other, the small talk, or the fact that they might not even have the patience or the pedagogical knowledge to actually help you improve. It's a massive hurdle. It takes more energy to manage the speaking partner than it does to actually practice the language.
Precisely. The logistics alone are enough to make most learners give up and retreat back into the safety of their textbooks or their passive listening routines. They substitute the feeling of learning, which they get from reading a grammar rule, for the actual skill of speaking.
Wow, the feeling of learning versus actual learning.
Exactly. And that leads to this enormous imbalance where their comprehension is at a C1 or C2 advanced level, but their speaking ability is stuck down in the B1 intermediate mud.
Which brings us to the ultimate solution we're unpacking today. Welcome to Everyday English Flow, daily English practice, natural speaking, and effortless listening flow. Before we dive into the deep end, I want to give you the roadmap. There are exactly 4 core principles we're breaking down today to solve this problem permanently.
Just 4 principles.
Just 4. If you apply these 4 principles, you bypass the need for a speaking partner entirely, and you start rewiring your brain to speak automatically.
And since our focus today is heavily on C1 level mastery, let's establish some foundational vocabulary right away. We aren't just going to use these words, we're going to dissect how advanced speakers deploy them. To really grasp these 4 core principles, we need to look at 2 essential phrasal verbs that define the journey of a language learner. The first one is to figure out.
Now, if I'm a C1 learner, I'm probably thinking, well, I already know what figure out means. It means to solve a math problem. But we're using it differently here, aren't we?
We are, yeah. As C1 learners, you understand the basic definition, but notice the nuance in how it's used in psychological or developmental contexts. It isn't just about calculating an equation. It implies a struggle, a journey through confusion to arrive at a conclusion or a solution. It's about untangling a complex web.
Oh, I see.
For example, an advanced learner wouldn't just say, I solved my speaking problem. They might say, it took me years to figure out why my speaking wasn't improving despite all my studying. The phrase figure out inherently communicates the frustration and the eventual relief of the discovery.
That makes total sense. It adds so much emotional weight to the sentence. And the second phrasal verb.
The second is to hold back. In a literal sense, it means to physically restrain someone. But in the context of advanced language learning and personal development, it means to prevent progress or realization of potential.
Like an invisible barrier.
Yes, we often use it when discussing invisible barriers. For instance, your fear of making mistakes in front of native speakers is holding you back from achieving true fluency. It means the fear is an active, ongoing force preventing your forward momentum.
I really want to emphasize that psychological aspect. Adults are terrified of sounding foolish. I mean, we spend our whole professional lives building up an identity of competence, and then we try to speak a new language, and suddenly we sound like a toddler. That ego hit is absolutely holding people back.
It's a huge factor.
It is. We are going to figure out exactly what is holding you back today. And make sure you stay with us to the very end, because there is a highly effective bonus technique at the very end of this session that ties every single theoretical concept we're about to discuss into a practical reality.
It's a technique that strips away all the academic theory and gives you a daily actionable habit. Because knowledge without application is essentially just trivia.
Could not agree more. And just a quick reminder for everyone joining us on this journey, if you are enjoying this, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support is the engine that helps us keep bringing you these deep dives into the mechanics of language. All right, let's get into the mechanics.
Let's do it.
In the next 15 minutes, so don't skip, you will learn the precise difference between parroting native speakers and true advanced imitation that actually rewires your brain for C1 fluency. So let's unpack this. What is imitation, really? Because I know a lot of listeners hear the word imitation and they immediately picture themselves sitting in a dark room with headphones on, blindly repeating the sounds a speaker is making, like a parrot mimicking a human.
Yeah, that is by far the most common and frankly the most dangerous misconception in language learning today. We need to draw a hard line in the sand right now between two concepts. What imitation is not is just repeating exact words after a native speaker, merely to mimic their pronunciation. That is called repetition, or in some circles, shadowing.
So wait, if I'm listening to a BBC News anchor and I try to mimic their exact intonation and repeat their exact sentence, you're saying that's not helping me become a fluent speaker?
It's helping you with accent reduction, certainly. It's training the physical muscles of your mouth and jaw to produce English phonemes. But it does absolutely nothing to teach your brain how to generate original language. Repetition is mechanical. True, advanced imitation, the kind that builds C1 and C2 fluency, is an intensely active cognitive process.
Okay, so what is the actual definition then?
The definition we were working with today is this. You listen to a conversation, a story, or a speech, you internalize the core meaning, and then you deliver that same thought using your own words and your own grammatical structures.
Let's really hammer home this C1 vocabulary distinction, imitation versus repetition.
Right. Repetition is passive mirroring. You don't even need to understand what you are saying to repeat it. You can train a bird to repeat a phrase. Imitation in our context is analytical, reconstructive, and creative. It is believed by prominent neurolinguists that the phrase express your thoughts is the key differentiator here.
Express your thoughts, got it.
Let's look at the mechanics of moving from passive absorption to active expression. When you absorb language passively, or when you merely repeat it, your brain is acting as a simple conduit. The information comes in through the auditory cortex and goes straight out through the motor cortex. The language generation centers of your brain, like Broca's area, are largely bypassing the heavy lifting.
So my brain is essentially just forwarding an email without reading it.
That's a great modern equivalent, yes.
Yeah.
But to truly express your thoughts, your brain has to synthesize the incoming information, access your personal vocabulary reserves from long-term memory, select the appropriate grammatical structures to fit the context, and construct a sentence on the fly.
I want to try an analogy here to see if I'm tracking this correctly. Tell me if this makes sense. Basic repetition, or shadowing, feels to me like tracing a drawing. Imagine you have a piece of very thin, translucent tracing paper.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
You lay it over a master artist's sketch of landscape, and you just follow their lines with your pencil. You're moving your hand, you're doing a physical activity, and at the end of the process, you have a piece of paper that looks like a nice landscape. But if I suddenly take the master sketch away and I hand you a blank piece of paper and say, okay, now draw a landscape, you're gonna freeze. You don't know how to draw, you just know how to trace.
That captures the psychological illusion of repetition perfectly.
Hmm.
When learners just repeat after audio, they feel highly competent in the moment. The tracing paper gives them the illusion of mastery. But the second they step into a real conversation, the master sketch is gone. They are staring at a blank canvas, and they realize they never actually learned how to mix the paints or compose the image.
Exactly. But advanced imitation, this technique we are diving into today, is entirely different. It's like walking into a gallery, standing in front of a beautiful, complex painting, and studying it intensely. You look at the colors, the subjects, the emotional weight of the scene.
Yes, deep observation.
Then you turn your back on the painting, you walk into a completely different room where you have a blank canvas, and you try to paint that same scene entirely from memory. You aren't copying the brushstrokes exactly. You might use a slightly different shade of blue for the sky. You might place a tree slightly further to the left. But you are capturing the essence, the core meaning, using your own artistic skills.
And that physical and mental transition, walking from the gallery into the empty room with the blank canvas, that is where the neurological magic of language acquisition happens. When you force yourself to recreate the meaning without looking at the source, you are forcing your brain to retrieve structures and vocabulary under pressure.
It's a real workout for the brain.
It really is. You are no longer relying on the native speaker to do the heavy lifting of sentence construction. You are taking their raw, abstract idea, pulling it into your own mind, and running it through your own linguistic machinery.
Which means when I finally get into a real conversation, my machinery is already oiled and running. I'm not tracing anymore. But, I have to admit, conceptualizing this is one thing, but picturing how to actually do it on a Tuesday morning at my desk is another. Which leads us to the practical application.
The most important part.
Exactly. In the next 15 minutes, what you will learn is how to actively restructure sentences in real time, so don't skip. This is where the real practice happens and where the theory becomes reality. Let's look at the Santa Claus example. This is where this abstract idea of machinery really becomes visible.
I'm ready. Let's really tear this example apart and look at the engine underneath.
Okay, I am going to read a short text. This is a first-person narrative. Imagine a native speaker, maybe a colleague or a friend, sitting across from you telling you this quick story about their childhood.
All right, setting the scene.
When I was a child, my parents liked to pretend, like many other parents, that Santa Claus would bring us presents at Christmas. So when my siblings and I would wake up on Christmas morning, there'd be a bunch of presents from supposedly Santa Claus sitting in front of the fireplace.
Great example.
Now, the imitation exercise here requires transforming that first-person story into a third-person narrative.
Right. So instead of being the person telling the story, you are now the narrator reporting on what happened to him. The transformation is like this. When he was a child, his parents liked to pretend that Santa Claus would bring them presents. So when he and his siblings would wake up...
Wait, I have to stop you there. I'm playing the role of the skeptic here.
Go for it.
Changing I to he and changing us to them sounds incredibly simple. It sounds like a basic worksheet exercise from a middle school Spanish class. You're telling me this basic mental gymnastics is the secret to C1 fluency. That sounds almost too simple to be true.
It sounds simple on the surface, sure, but let's look at what's actually happening in the brain's language centers when you do that in real time, out loud, without reading from a script. It comes down to a concept called working memory. Think of your brain like a computer. Your long-term memory is the hard drive where all your vocabulary is stored. Your working memory is the RAM, the short-term workspace, where you hold information just long enough to manipulate it.
Okay, I'm following the RAM.
Yes. When you change, when I was a child to when he was a child, you are maxing out your language RAM. You have to actively hold the semantic meaning of the native speaker's story in your mind. The concept of the parents, the pretend play, the Christmas morning.
All at the same time.
Exactly. While you are holding that abstract concept, you simultaneously have to dive into your hard drive, pull out the third-person pronouns, check them against the verbs to ensure subject-verb agreement, because if it's present tense, I go becomes he goes, and then physically articulate the newly built sentence.
Ah, I see. Because you can't just zone out. If you zone out and just repeat, you'll say, when I was a child, which fails the exercise. You are forcing the brain to stay entirely engaged. It's like doing a math problem while juggling.
That's a perfect way to describe it. You are holding the meaning while simultaneously rebuilding the architectural structure of the sentence. You have to actively compute the grammar rules without stopping to recite them from a textbook. This completely bridges the gap between knowing a rule and deploying a rule.
Before we move on to how to scale this, let's do an intensive C1 breakdown of the language used in the Santa Claus snippet because there is so much rich vocabulary packed into these two sentences. Let's start with the phrasal verb, wake up. On the surface, this is absolute beginner English. A1 level. You are asleep, you open your eyes, you wake up. But how does this change contextually in a narrative structure like this?
That's a brilliant observation. In narratives, especially personal anecdotes, wake up isn't just the literal physical act of ceasing to sleep. It is used as a temporal marker to set a scene and establish an emotional baseline.
A temporal marker. Interesting.
All right, listen to the phrase. So when he and his siblings would wake up, it establishes a routine, a nostalgic condition for the action that follows. It's a framing device. It creates anticipation in storytelling. The speaker is essentially saying, the stage is now set, the curtain is opening, prepare for the reveal.
It's the difference between a medical report, like the patient woke up at 7 a.m., and a story like every summer we would wake up to the smell of pancakes. The verb is identical, but the C1 mastery is in the atmosphere it creates.
Absolutely.
And speaking of the people waking up, why is the word sibling such a clear indicator of C1 proficiency compared to a learner just saying brothers and sisters?
It comes down to linguistic economy and maturity. Brothers and sisters is perfectly fine. It is grammatically correct and universally understood. But siblings is a single, elegant umbrella term.
It just sounds more advanced.
It does. In advanced English, efficiency is key. You don't want to waste syllables if you don't have to. Using siblings shows that the speaker has moved beyond basic categorical vocabulary, where you list every individual item and can group concepts together seamlessly. It's a hallmark of a mature, fluent speaker who values the rhythm of the sentence over redundant clarification.
I love that phrase, linguistic economy. It's like packing a suitcase perfectly instead of just throwing everything into a trash bag. And then there is my absolute favorite word in this whole passage. The word is supposedly.
Oh, that is a fantastic
The
word.
sentence is, there'd be a bunch of presents from supposedly Santa Claus sitting in front of the fireplace.
What's fascinating here is how the word supposedly entirely shifts the emotional weight and the mood of the sentence. It isn't just a simple adverb modifying a verb. It is what linguists call an epistemic modality marker. It's a tool for expressing collective doubt, shared knowledge, or an understood fiction between the speaker and the listener.
So it's basically a verbal wink.
Precisely. It's a wink. The speaker obviously knows Santa Claus isn't real. The listener knows Santa Claus isn't real. But instead of breaking the flow of the story to explain that, the speaker just drops in the word, supposedly. It communicates that shared wink perfectly. It says, we both know the truth, but let's humor the illusion for the sake of the story.
I think learners struggle with adverbs like this because they try to translate them directly from their native language, and the cultural nuance gets completely lost. Could we give the listeners a few more examples of how to use supposedly in different contexts? Because it really is such a versatile, powerful C1 tool.
Absolutely. Let's look at 3 distinct environments to see how it shapes the narrative.
Yeah.
First, let's imagine a corporate business context. Your company is implementing a massive new IT system, and there have been endless meetings about it. You might turn to a colleague and say, the new software is supposedly going to cut our processing time in half.
Ooh, I hear the skepticism there.
Exactly. You are communicating what you've been officially told by management. But the word supposedly implies you are reserving judgment until you actually see it work. You are subtly distancing yourself from the claim. You aren't calling the boss a liar, but you're saying, I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay, what about a casual context? Maybe you're out running errands on a Saturday.
Casually, you might say, I was supposedly next in line at the bakery, but that guy just cut right in front of me while I was looking at my phone.
Oh, the worst.
Right. Here, supposedly expresses frustration about an unwritten rule or a social expectation that was broken. It highlights the gap between what should have happened, according to social norms, and what actually happened in reality.
It adds so much more flavor than just saying, I was next in line. And what about a third context? Something maybe a bit more academic, formal, or objective.
Let's picture a museum tour guide discussing a recent archaeological find. They might say the artifact, supposedly dating back to the Ming Dynasty, is currently undergoing rigorous carbon authentication. In this formal environment, it isn't about skepticism or frustration. It introduces a claim that is generally stated by experts or historical texts, but serves as a disclaimer that it has not yet been definitively scientifically proven. It protects the speaker from making an absolute factual claim prematurely.
Those are fantastic examples. It really highlights how C1 mastery isn't about knowing more words, it's about knowing the emotional payload of the words you already have. Now, going back to the core transformation technique, we've established that changing pronouns while recreating the story is like mental gymnastics. But if a listener is sitting in their car right now thinking, if I try to listen to a full minute of audio, hold it in my head, change the pronouns, and speak it out loud, my brain is going to completely melt down and I'm going to quit. What do we tell them?
We tell them that they are absolutely right to feel that way, and that jumping into the deep end is the fastest way to guarantee failure, which is why there is a very specific methodology to this.
And that is exactly what we are covering next. In the next 15 minutes, you will learn the exact blueprint to scale this technique from beginner to advanced without getting overwhelmed, without your brain melting down, so don't skip, because this is the framework that guarantees consistency.
This is where we introduce the easy to hard imitation framework. It's the structural backbone of the entire methodology.
Yes, and it is believed by important researchers that this method of progressive training is the most highly effective way to build spontaneous language production. Renowned cognitive linguists, the people who study how the brain acquires and organizes language, have studied this extensively, and they always point back to this staged approach. You don't just pull up a dense 20-minute TED Talk on macroeconomic theory and try to reconstruct it in the third person on day one. That's a recipe for total demoralization.
Exactly. You have to deeply respect the biological limits of human working memory. Our brains are incredible machines, but the RAM, that short-term workspace we talked about earlier, is surprisingly small. We can only hold so much new, unintegrated information at once before the system crashes. That is why progressive training works so well. It manages the cognitive load. The framework is divided into 3 distinct, manageable stages.
Let's walk through them step by step so listeners know exactly what to do. Stage 1 is small portions.
Stage 1 involves imitating short phrases and brief sentences. We are talking about maybe 3 to 5 seconds of audio at a time. This stage is not about testing your memory. It's about building fundamental confidence and getting used to the physical act of rapid language generation.
Okay, so a very gentle start.
Yes. You listen to a tiny fragment of speech, like when I was a child. You pause the audio, and you immediately reformulate it, when he was a child.
It's like doing a single push-up. It doesn't seem like much, but you are establishing the neural pathway. And once that pathway feels comfortable, you move on to stage 2, larger portions. Let's look at that phrasal verb really quickly. Move on. For our C1 learners, to move on here doesn't mean to physically relocate to a new house. It means to progress to the next stage, step, or emotional state after successfully completing or resolving a previous one.
Right. You don't move on until stage 1 feels almost boring.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do move on to stage 2, you are extending the duration of the listening phase. You are waiting for the speaker to complete a full thought or an entire conceptual idea before you hit pause. You might listen to, when I was a child, my parents liked to pretend that Santa Claus would bring us presents. Pause.
Okay, that's a lot more to hold on to.
It is. Now you have to hold that entire complex idea in your head, process the relationships between the parents, the child, and Santa, and then express it. You're intentionally increasing the cognitive load.
This is where the heavy lifting starts. You're stretching that working memory capacity. And finally, you reach stage 3, the whole speech. This is the mountaintop. This is what fluency looks like. You listen to an entire speech, a 5-minute story, or a presentation, and without pausing every few seconds, you absorb the narrative arc and you deliver the core of it entirely on your own. You essentially become the speaker, giving a summary or a retelling of the event. But how exactly should a learner go about it? And there's another great C1 phrase right there, to go about it.
To go about it is a fantastic idiom. It means how to tackle a problem, how to approach a complex task, or what methodology to use. If someone gives you a massive project at work, you might ask, how should I go about doing this?
And how do you go about mastering this imitation technique?
By strictly, almost religiously, adhering to the easy to hard progression. If we connect this back to the bigger picture of cognitive load, starting small is a defense mechanism against frustration.
And let's be honest, when you are learning a language, frustration is the absolute enemy of consistency. The moment you feel stupid, or the moment a task feels impossible, your brain looks for any excuse to quit. You'll suddenly decide your desk needs to be cleaned, or you need to check your email.
Exactly. Frustration spikes your cortisol levels, which actively inhibits learning and memory formation. By starting with short phrases in stage 1, you build mental stamina for language production without triggering that stress response. You are stretching the muscle slowly, getting it warm, before trying to lift the heavy weight of a continuous, fluid conversation.
It is brilliant because you are effectively tricking your brain into doing incredibly hard grammatical work, conjugating verbs, matching pronouns, establishing timelines, without actually feeling like you are studying. You're just playing a game of narrative reconstruction, which perfectly flows into understanding why this works so much better than traditional study.
It really is a game changer.
In the next 15 minutes, we are going to dive into the magic of implicit learning. We're going to explain how this technique completely replaces boring grammar books. So, what does this all mean for you as a learner?
It means liberation. It means you get to stop agonizing over why a specific tense is used. Implicit learning is, by strict psychological definition, the process where learning happens without your conscious awareness or explicit instruction. You are acquiring the complex rules of the system simply by being exposed to the system in action, rather than reading a manual about the system.
I always think about it like learning to ride a bike. When you teach a kid to ride a bike, you don't sit them down with a whiteboard and calculate the physics of balance, angular momentum, and the friction coefficient of the rubber tires on the pavement. That would be absurd.
Right. They'd just stare at you.
You just put them on the seat, tell them to pedal, they wobble, they fall, they make micro adjustments, and eventually their body understands the physics implicitly. The muscle memory takes over.
That is a perfect, scientifically accurate analogy. The body learns the physics without knowing the math. And it is exactly how babies and children learn the impossibly complex grammar rules of their first language. A 4-year-old toddler doesn't know what a subjunctive clause is. They don't know the definition of a past participle, but they can use one flawlessly if they have heard it enough times in context. When you use the easy-to-hard imitation technique, you are artificially replicating this natural immersive environment for your adult brain. You are forcing your brain to infer the rules through repeated action.
Let's talk about a specific example of where explicit study utterly fails and implicit learning thrives. Let's talk about the ultimate trap for English learners, the present perfect tense.
Oh, the present perfect.
I have gone, she has seen, we have been. I've personally seen brilliant students stare at textbook pages for hours, pulling their hair out, trying to memorize the exact, highly specific timelines and conditions required to use the present perfect versus the simple past. They try to memorize rules like, use present perfect for an action that started in the past but has relevance to the present.
It is a trap because the analytical mind gets in the way of natural expression. When you are in a real conversation and someone asks you a question, you have about 1 second to respond. If your strategy is to mentally pull up a textbook page, plot the action on a timeline on a whiteboard in your head, check to see if the action is completed or ongoing, and then format the sentence. Well, the native speaker has already walked away. The analytical mind is too slow for real-time speech.
Yes, you freeze. The hard drive crashes because the CPU is overloaded.
Yeah.
But when you imitate a native speaker who is naturally using the present perfect to describe an ongoing state, when you adopt their story and restructure it, you aren't calculating those rules. You aren't plotting timelines.
You are just using the linguistic tool to accomplish a goal, expressing an idea. The focus shifts entirely away from the explicit rule. You are no longer asking yourself, am I following Rule 4, subsection B of Chapter 7? You are only asking, am I successfully communicating this story about the parents in the presence?
You absorb the grammar implicitly. You start to feel what is correct rather than having to deduce what is correct logically. It's like when a native speaker hears a grammatically incorrect sentence, they don't usually know why it's wrong. They just say, that sounds weird. That's implicit knowledge.
Exactly.
And through this technique, you learn the idioms, the phrasal verbs, the intonations, and the speaking patterns that are actually used in day-to-day conversations, not just the stiff, formal English found in academic texts.
Let's highlight that specific phrase you just used, day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
For our C1 learners, day-to-day is a fantastic, highly versatile adjective phrase. It describes things that happen as part of ordinary, regular, routine life. It strips away formality.
Yes. Instead of saying something robotic like normal daily conversations, saying day-to-day conversations sounds much more natural, fluid, and advanced. How else might we use it in a professional or personal context?
In a business setting, you might say, the CEO handles the overarching long-term strategy, but the operations manager runs the day-to-day operations of the company. It draws a contrast between the big picture and the routine mechanics. Or, in a personal setting, she is a great problem solver. She effortlessly handles all the day-to-day issues that pop up in the office. It implies a sense of routine groundedness.
It is that day-to-day natural English that textbooks simply cannot teach you because textbooks are inherently artificial. They are sterilized environments. Imitation forces you into the messy, beautiful reality of how the language is actually spoken by real people with real emotions.
This raises an important question, though. The theory is incredibly sound. We understand cognitive load, we understand working memory, we understand implicit versus explicit learning. But how does the learner listening to us right now take this massive amount of theory and apply it immediately? What is the tangible first step?
Well, we promised you a bonus at the beginning of this deep dive, and here it is. This is the ultimate step-by-step application that you can start using the minute my voice stops speaking. To get started today, do not go looking for a 30-minute podcast. Do not try to imitate a full movie. Take a 1-minute audio clip, maybe a clip from a YouTube vlog, a quick news segment, or even a short story read aloud. Take that 1-minute clip and ruthlessly break it into tiny 10-second chunks.
10 seconds is the absolute perfect starting point for stage one. It's enough time to hold a complete clause, but not so long that it overflows your working memory.
Exactly. And practice the easy to hard method with those 10-second chunks for just 5 minutes a day. That's it, 5 minutes. Listen to a 10-second chunk. Pause the audio. Say the meaning in your own words out loud. Change the pronouns from first person to third person. Change the tense from present to past. Play with the architectural structure of the sentence. Do that for 5 minutes a day.
It sounds so manageable when we break it down like that.
It is. Consistency in the step-by-step approach is the true secret to the technique discussed today. You do not need to lock yourself in a library and study for 4 hours on a Sunday to achieve fluency. 5 minutes of highly focused, neurologically demanding imitation every single day will compound into massive, undeniable fluency gains over a few months.
It's about frequency, not duration. And since we've talked so much today about learning day-to-day expressions, bypassing textbook rules, and building that intuitive, implicit sense of the language, I have a challenge for our listeners.
I love a good challenge. Let's hear it.
Here is an idiom for you to figure out. The idiom is to get the hang of something.
Oh, that is a fantastic one. It fits today's theme perfectly.
It really does. So listeners, based on today's deep dive into practicing imitation, utilizing progressive training, and relying on implicit learning rather than memorization, what do you think this idiom, to get the hang of something, means? Write your answers in the comments section. Don't look it up in a dictionary. I am very curious to see how you deduce the meaning entirely from the context of our discussion about learning a new skill through feeling and repetition.
I love seeing those answers roll in. It's real-time implicit learning in action. Now, we have given you the theory, the framework, the advanced vocabulary, and the 5-minute daily habit. The only thing left in this equation is action. If you are ready to stop just passively listening, stop making excuses about not having a speaking partner, and start actively speaking and rewiring your brain, write "I stay committed" in the comment box below right now. Make that public commitment to your learning journey.
It sounds like a small thing, but it is a powerful psychological step to declare your intention publicly. It shifts your identity from a passive consumer to an active participant.
It really is. It draws a line in the sand. Once again, if this everyday English flow helped you break through a mental barrier today, please like, share, and subscribe. Send this to a friend who is struggling with their speaking confidence.
And as you go about your day-to-day activities this week, I want you to consider the immense, truly breathtaking capacity your brain already has for language acquisition. You have the machinery, you just need to feed it the right way.
Absolutely. Think about this final thought. If you learned your first language perfectly, with all its impossible complexities, without ever once reading a single grammar book or taking a multiple choice test, imagine what your English could sound like a year from now if you simply stop studying and start imitating. Think about that. Keep practicing, keep speaking, and we'll see you next time.